As a trumpet player myself, being mentored by Wynton Marsalis would be a dream. But there are many other talented musicians around the St. Louis area, inspiring the next generation of performers and educators, including our guest joining us today, Matthew Henry, who is the Director of Percussion Studies at UMSL. Welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Now, I have to be transparent in that I am totally biased about the importance of music education. My mom and my sister are music educators. Tell us about the importance of music education.
Well, I think the importance is that everybody's a consumer of music, first and foremost, right? I teach a course, and the first thing I do on the first day is raise your hands if you listen to music, and look around the room, and everybody raises their hands, right? So we all listen to music. Not only that we're all consumers, but we can all be advocates for it, right? And so when you teach young people about music education, they become advocates, and it sustains quality music making in the community, at the schools, churches, wherever that may be. And not to mention the scientific, brain function and emotional functions and societal, relationship functions that are much better for students when they're involved in music programs.
Yeah. And as we saw in the story, that mentorship as well, you never know the connection you make, even from elementary school up to high school, that mentorship and connection can spark and shape a student's career for the rest of their life.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Tell us about the importance of that mentorship.
Well, I think the inspiration of seeing people that you want to emulate, is very important. So understanding that we can look at our mentors and think, okay, I want to be like that. Maybe I'll make these adjustments and walk through society in a different way. But also, if we don't have what came before us, how are we supposed to know where to go? Right. And that's the thing. So I know that I was inspired by people of various cultures to create my path differently than my teacher did. And my students create their path differently than mine. They take what interests them and pushes forward. So you have to have a source for that information. Yeah.
It's so rewarding. And there are a lot of, positive sides to looking at music education, but let's talk about the challenges, because I'm thinking about an elementary school classroom and kids just wailing on recorders and making a lot of mistakes. There's a challenge in that. And then, the high school directors who dedicate evenings, weekends. It's their entire life, teaching these kids music. And not to mention, balancing that behavior challenges that you sometimes see in those extracurricular activities. Tell us about some of the challenges in being a music educator.
Well, I think that you cited some of them, right, which are the funding for music programs is often a lot higher than it is for other programs, because you have to have instruments. You have to have multiple instruments. So if you have a music education classroom, you need 20 recorders maybe, right? And you can't just use a digital textbook like you may be able to in a science or history course.
Right.
So you have to have physical instruments in the room. You have to maintain them. What if one breaks? You have to have extras. It's always a hustle, and there's so many moving parts to actual music education classroom management, which is also personalities of the kids, depending on the age. And it takes special people to realize when they're going through music education programs, I want to be an elementary educator. Okay, high school is my thing. College, that's where I went. I kind of always knew starting out that I wanted to be a collegiate instructor for various reasons. So I think we have to be able to guide students to their passion place as far as that goes, and not tell them, you must teach high school, or you must, we have to kind of nurture that passion inside of them as musicians on a different path so they can meet those challenges, because they're real. Yeah.
Now, you touched on the funding aspect. Now, I've heard rumors or seen actual credible threats to cutting music funding in schools. Is that still the case?
Yeah, I don't think they're rumors or threats. They actually happen. Those are the first things that do get cut.
Yeah.
And I think that it's unfortunate for many reasons. I go back to what I said. Everybody in our society is a consumer of music on one degree or another, right? And I think the further we get away from understanding that that's our connector, the further people go through administration or politics, then they get away from that connection. And then they're like, oh, they're only looking at numbers on a page. They're not looking at using music to connect every student in that school to the community. And that's a way that we can do it. I don't see music as a universal language, but I think it's a universal connector, right? We use it at all kinds of events. So I think the disparity is between actual funds on paper and then what the actual value of society of music education is, and performance and consumership. So, but there are advocates out there. The Missouri Alliance for Arts Education does a Fine Arts Education Week every spring in Jefferson City in Missouri, and they call on groups from around the state to come play, sing, bring your art. It's not just music, but art and all those things. So we are aware as the educators that there is an issue with funding because music's so expensive to keep in the courses, and we want people to understand, the people that are making the decisions on paper, to cut this budget item. Don't just look at the numbers.
Right.
Look at the effect that music has and the connections we can make in the community. Yeah.
Right, absolutely. Matthew Henry, Director of Percussion Studies at UMSL, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.